Alright guys, this video is going to be about bear shaft tuning. It's just going to be an overview due to I don't actually have to tune any arrows at the moment. When I do have to tune some arrows though, I will be making a video on the actual process of me doing it for you guys. However, I just wanted to get this information out there so if you do start bear shaft tuning, you'll at least know what to look for and what to do if those situations come. So, let's get started. Alright, so to start, we're going to go over a couple tips for bear shaft tuning that will hopefully make the process a little bit quicker for you, a little bit easier, and you won't run into as many snags. To start with is your target. This bag target would not be a good example of what to use. Basically what happens is you hit the target and your arrow bounces all around and you're never going to get a consistent result. Another thing is if you cant your bow, you have to be careful. Because basically, I'll get out a bow here to show you. What you're looking for is your arrow is either going to go this way, up, or down, depending on what's happening with your shot. But if you cant your bow, those results are going to move from perfectly up, perfectly down, to the left or the right, to at an angle. So you just have to be aware of your cant, because it's going to affect the way your arrows go. So if you shoot a straight bow, you have no issues. It's going to go, perfectly right, perfectly left, perfectly up. But if you cant it, it's just going to move on those angles. So, something to be aware of. So the next tip to start out with is going to be about when you start cutting your arrows. If you're shooting carbons with the pull-out nocks, an easy thing to do is actually glue your insert in, put your point on, and then actually cut from the nock end. As long as you don't care about where the cresting that comes on the arrow ends up. If you're shooting an aluminum like this arrow or a wood arrow, I would recommend hot melt so the insert will easily pop out and easily go back in. And it's even a good thing to use with carbons while bear shaft tuning for that purpose. Alright, so when you first start bear shaft tuning, you're going to want to start about 10 feet. And you're going to want to work the arrow in so it's fairly straight to where you're shooting. And then you're going to want to move out 15 yards, 20 yards, and basically what that's going to do is it's going to fine tune. So anything that's happening at 10 feet will be exaggerated past that. As far as your arrows that you're choosing, I would suggest starting with a weak arrow because you can always trim it to shorten and stiffen the spine. However, if you start with a stiff arrow, the only option you really have is to add point weight, which is going to have its limits. Alright, so when you first start bear shaft tuning, what you're going to want to look for is either your knock highs or your knock lows. Now basically what's happening there is your knocking point on your string is off. If you have knock high, basically your knocking point is high, and if you have knock low, your knocking point is low. However, occasionally you can have a knock high that's actually knock low, and what's happening is your knock's bouncing off the shelf, causing it to go knock high. So if you hear a loud twang when you're shooting, you might actually have a knock low situation. Alright, so now we're going to start talking about the spine. So you have two options here. This is going to be for a right-hand shooter. As far as what I'm referencing, a lefty is going to be the exact opposite. So you either have knock left or knock right. We're going to start with knock left, which indicates a weak spine. Basically what's happening is your arrow's flexing around the shelf and it can't recover because it's just too weak. And what you have to do in this situation is either shorten the arrow or reduce point weight. Now, there are downsides of reducing point weight, and basically reducing the overall point weight or the overall arrow weight, which can start getting into issues if you go too light. Usually you want 9 to 10 grains per pound. And if you shorten it, basically what you're doing is you're just reducing the arrow length, stiffening it. So what you want to do is you're going to want to keep shooting, whether you're reducing point weight or you're cutting it, until that knock is pointing straight to you and your arrow is straight into the target. So, if you are cutting your arrow, which most people do, and that's probably the most common way to fix a weak arrow, you're going to want to start with cutting about a 1/4 inch at a time. You could go a 1/2 inch if you have a pretty radical knock left, but you're going to want to fine tune. A little bit can actually change your spine a lot, so just be aware of that. Alright, so your next option, or your next result is going to be a stiff arrow. So that's going to be knock to the right of where your point hits for a right-handed shooter, like I stated earlier. Now your option here is basically to add point weight. And basically what you're doing by adding point weight is when you release that string and it starts pushing on the arrow, it has to move more weight in the front, causing it to flex more, effectively weakening the dynamic spine. So if you have a weak stiff arrow, it's the same process. Keep adding point weight until you bring it in straight. And then once you're at this straight point, whether you came from a stiff result or a weak result, you're going to want to start backing up your distance and making sure it stays in this area. Now, one thing you have to be aware of is when you do add fletchings, it's going to take care of a little bit knock left or a little bit knock right. This is basically getting that arrow dialed in to where your feathers can take care of the rest. Alright guys, so that's basically all the information you need. It's a fairly simple process. It's not too difficult to do. You just have to make sure that your form is good while you're doing it, because any input you put into the arrow can cause false results. So you're going to want to make sure your release is really clean while you're bare shaft tuning, and that your draw length is consistent, because those are two things that will highly change the overall results of where the arrow is. Alright guys, that's going to be it for this one. I hope the information was pretty good for you. I hope you're able to grasp it fairly well and that you'll be able to actually bare shaft an arrow to get it nice and tuned into your bow. Like I said, I apologize for not actually tuning the arrow. However, once I need to actually do it, I'll get a video out to you that shows me going through the steps myself. As far as the next episode is concerned, I don't actually have anything set in stone yet. I'm deciding between a couple things. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of Trad Trails. Until next time, have a good one.